everyone. My name is Siamak Paulson, and welcome to another episode of my podcast. As you can see, I have a special guest today. My very good friend Nick Morris is my guest in this episode of the podcast. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, C-Mac, and it's good to be here, mate. I've been watching these for a long time, big fan, and well done. Really,
excellent. Thank you.
I take my cap off to you, mate. You've done a really good job. So
thank you for that. I was just telling you, Nick, that we might have done 3 episodes since I started because we've been talking about it for quite a while.
The idea when you had the idea to do it, yeah.
Excellent. So it's great time. You're down in Brisbane, and we can do it face to face. That's excellent.
Yeah.
As you know, mate, the first question of every episode is about your career.
Yeah.
Your sort of story.
Yeah.
Where did you start? How did you end up in the geosynthetics industry?
Yeah, okay, cool. So look, I probably started 20 years ago in the commercial construction space. More focusing on QA, like ISO 9001 processes and business systems was sort of my background. I got a phone call probably 14 years ago now, from a lining company sort of starting up and merging with another company, and they needed someone to come in and sort of build their systems to go work in the oil and gas industry. Mm-hmm. So I took the plunge, moved down from North Queensland, and set up my life in Brisbane, and I was with those guys for probably 7 years. From looking after health, safety, HR, ISO 9001. Sort of fell into the engineering and the QA of geosynthetics. Which I strangely loved. It's I found out I was pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. More looking at the on-site data collection, collation, packaging it up and sending off to the asset owner and design engineers for approval. From a business standpoint, I could see a lot of from my background, a lot of synergies between the two, which I think I fell into pretty easily. From that, I found a passion for procurement of geosynthetics. The more and more I was exposed to it, I got to know the suppliers and which materials did what function. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to go and visit a few factories over in Thailand, Malaysia, Vancouver. So that was there were some pretty sort of defining moments where. Mm-hmm. You're also looking after material from factory to end of life on project after being installed. So all the different areas in between I found fascinating, to be honest. So then I sort of in 2018 I think I took the leap, and myself and another gentleman started GOQ. Yep. So we're 8 years, in July, we're 8 years old, which, that's flown by. Look, falling into electrical leak detection and the quality assurance on site, and, that's something that sort of has been, my sort of staple for the last 14 years. And, I've got a real passion for it. And,
absolutely.
I've been able to convert my passion into a business, which, I've been pretty fortunate at achieving that. So.
Nice. Excellent.
That's sort of a roundabout background in a very convoluted way, but yeah.
No, that's great. I sort of I like this little slide I used to see in Boyd Ramsey, our good friend Boyd Ramsey's presentations about purpose, which then I realized it's actually a Japanese kind of concept that sort of talks about what you're good at, what you like doing, enjoy doing, what you get paid for, and what is good for the future and the next generations. And then if you have something that ticks all 4 boxes, then that's your purpose. So I see a lot of that in what you do, Nick. So congratulations on 8 years of GOQ. So let's talk about the because as you know. The electrical leak locations, or even CQA, construction quality assurance, they've been around for years and years, but not as common or not as popular or not as trusted and proven as they are today. And I think you and your company has had a really good or important role in making that happen across the industry. So my question is why do you think they are important? and how these can help, like both the quality assurance and the electric leak location can help the industry.
Look, it's a very good question, and it's one that I get asked every now and again by people that don't know the industry. I guess peeling it right back to the basics, what are geomembranes for? It's to contain, and some of these things that we're containing, some of the nastiest things that we've got on Earth. So if you look at metalliferous tailings, if you look at gold tailings, if you look at landfill, the leachate, some of the things we do not want to go into aquifers, into our into downstream. So from that basic sort of view, the CQA component is super important. We've got lining guys that do a great job. They do their own, they've got the first layer of CQC, which I like to call construction quality control. That's the guys internally, their internal processes. You then have a layer of CQA, which is usually engineering firms, people like GeoQ. Then you also have what probably is more common now in the last 14, 15 years is the electrical leak detection. And I think that's come a long way, from 20 years ago when it was really started to be used over in the US, and thanks to people like Abigail Gibson or Abigail Beck, she's been a really big integral part in the electrical leak detection. Guys like Warren Hornsey, they're the sort of the leaders and at the forefront. I think we're now starting to see a fourth layer of CQA and electrical leak detection, which is the dipole. So for an example, and I don't really want to ramble on too much, Siamak, but with a landfill cell, you have the CQC, you have a CQA inspection. We're seeing more and more of the ARC testing being requested to go over the bare geomembrane before the aggregate's being placed. And then traditionally we do the dipole over the aggregate. So we're sort of seeing more and more clients realize that it's CQA and inspections are a huge part of their project, and to reduce legacy issues in the future. Not only just because of it's the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for the general public, and hopefully our kids and our kids' kids, and all the way down the line. So I think in a short answer, we have different functions with QA, and we all do different things. And look, ultimately we want to get the target of zero leaks. We do have allowable leakage limits and allowable leakage rates, which I think historically, if we look at it, I'd be interested to do analysis of this. But what was the allowable leakage limits or rates 20 years ago compared to 15, compared to 10 to 5 to where we are now? And I think the new technologies that that are out there, both with on-site CQA inspections. I remember everything was paper-based. Now we've got iPads. Now we've got we've been dabbling in the use of AI. There's probably we'll talk about that a bit later on. But AI to do a quick check over of the data that's been collected. Now beforehand, that used to go back to an office in Brisbane, and there'd be 3 grads that would study it, and they'd all work it out. So I think the advancements in technology, we're sort of seeing that more people invest, and it's a lot easier to do these days. So I think to answer your question simply, like it is CQA, and it's one of the most important things, and I think in the whole project.
Absolutely. And you talked about ARC testing and the dipole testing. We've talked about examples that you've done an ARC testing, you found many holes. And then once the holes are repaired, then you put a gravel on top and then do your dipole and then find it.
Yeah, and look, there's two examples I like to use. One is a larger tailings facility, and one's a landfill. So, for instance, the landfill it's a Queensland-based landfill. I won't go into any details. I don't know how your legal department goes. Look, the landfill was 18,000 square meters. Great asset owner, very pro QA, very pro looking after their environment. The installer was, I think one of the leading installers in the country. I've got a lot of respect for these guys. there was a CQA, which was a third-party engineering firm. Again, a lot of respect for those guys. And the asset owner said, we've got to do this dipole test. It's in the spec. What happens if there's holes before we put the aggregate down? And I said, well, that's a great question. Yeah. And they asked, is there any tests that we can do, beforehand? I said, well, we can do arc testing. Mm-hmm. So we came through, did the arc test over 3 days, and found I think it was something like 18 holes on the bare geomembrane. Granted, 3 of those were probably a bit silly. They were silly mistakes, and but the other ones, were, they weren't needle size, but they were. I could understand why the visual inspection missed them. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get rid of 18 holes prior to putting the aggregate down, and the cushion geotextile aggregate, and we found 0 leak paths on the dipole test. Yeah. So, from the client's perspective, they looked at it and went, hang on, so we would have had to sit there and dig up 18 holes. Yeah. On the top of the aggregate, have a little digger run over there.
If they weren't found.
So, and then they said, we've calculated, we've had a saving of X, Y, Z because of it. So, the client's representative got a big pat on the back for, organising the arc testing first. So that was great. But, notwithstanding, you can do dipole testing is a very effective way of testing, but it could have gone. So with dipole testing, sometimes holes mask other holes.
That's right.
So we have a visual, and there's other podcasts, there's other webinars that go into this in more detail. But let's just say if you've got a large hole, and there's like 3 or 4 little holes around it, when we do the extrapolation of the data and the processing of the maps, you'll only see that one large hole.
Correct.
So what would go in there, patch it up, dig it up, patch it up, fill it back over, do a re-verification, and we'll find those 3 other holes that were being masked by that large hole. So, like in that instance, when we said, we saved 18 holes, well, we could have been there for 3 weeks going back and trying to chase, revalidate every single one. So, look, that to me is a really, really good example of utilising the 4 layers of CQA, CQC, CQA, electrical leak detection for arc, and ultimately dipole testing.
Absolutely.
Another one that I have, which I just popped into my head now, was it was a 300,000 square metre tailings dam. Our team were involved with, from being there from the construction's commencement. So we started with 2 guys on site. We're doing 10,000 squares a day, and I think we picked up at the end of the project about 103 leak paths. And again, that project, that wasn't, there was an asset owner that had built 6 of these prior. A great installer, a very reputable installer, which I'd again recommend to other, if I name them, I do recommend them to other clients. There was a tier one design firm who I again have a lot of respect for, and then 2 full-time CQA inspectors from another firm. Like 102 holes over 300,000 square meters. If we put it into perspective, that's 1 leak path or hole for every 3,000 squares. Yeah. So that's a significant. It was a single layered project, and that's a significant reduction of risk for that that operator.
Absolutely.
And not only the operator, but the landholders adjoining and legacy. So,
exactly. Exactly. So you talked about technology, Nick. I wanted to ask about what do you think what the effects are, how they, like with the change and evolving in the technologies as we've seen in the past maybe 2 decades that this legal location survey has been becoming more popular. What do you think that effect has been?
Yeah, look, I sort of touched on it in the last question there. In regards to the leak detection units becoming available, if you go back maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was only really 1 manufacturer of arc testers, or maybe 2 at the most, and they're all international. It was very difficult to get arc testers in the country. Now, we've been fortunate enough to be able to test every single every single manufacturer of both the arc testing and the dipole testing unit. So we've gone down and we've selected one specific arc testing brand, and we've selected one specific dipole testing kit, and also water lance as well. So a different water lance manufacturer as well. So, but with those, us being independent, we're actually able to pick and choose the best leak detection devices out there. But the availability of them, that's the main thing. Like again, not having one, I think we've got 16 arc testers in our fleet. We've got 3 dipole testing kits. Spare parts are available. We're able to, I think we hold more spare parts than the manufacturer. In some cases with the arc testers. But look, I think another thing that I was going to talk about is drones. I think drones have a huge importance. Drones have been around for 10 years, and we've been using them for inspections. But I think for geosynthetics, the potential to get into geosynthetics, especially confined spaces and tanks, that's something that we're really looking at the moment. We've got, we've been doing some R&D in that space, and we've actually got a prototype, and we've got a drone pilot on board with us. And we're doing some trials with not just geosynthetics, but we're going into critical areas in some of these plants that otherwise would have to wait to a shutdown because they can't send people in, because of certain acid dropping from machines and whatnot. So we're actually able to do inspections prior to the shutdowns or emptying a whole tank, or so it is. We're sort of grabbing technology by the horns and sort of going with it as well, and investing heavily into it as well. So
absolutely, and then you kind of start thinking about what's coming in the future, like in the next 5 to 10 years. What do you see? What improvements are required to be made? Where the industry you think go from? Where you see?
Yeah, look, from my perspective, there's probably 3 really critical items that I see, and I've been fortunate to be in the industry, as I said, for about 14 years, and I talk to asset owners, designers, consultants, lining contractors. I think we work with every single lining contractor in Australia, and I can pick up the phone and talk to each owner pretty candidly and openly. I think one of the critical things is training of technicians. I think, from my standpoint, we had a huge push from about 2005 to 2013 in the oil and gas regions in Surat Basin and Bowen Basin. Now we had a consequence of the oil and gas high specifications is we spat out a whole heap of really highly trained, competent technicians. That's right. And I think some of the most skilled in the world, to be honest. Now these guys are all in their mid 40s, 50s, and they're all they want to be home with their families. They're all leaving the industry. Most of them hopefully most of them didn't live like weekend millionaires and put their money away and paid their houses off. So you're seeing that they're not going back out to do 2-on-1 rosters and swings anymore. They're working in the cities and they're working in the towns. So I can't see a new generation of lining technicians coming through. That's one I think is the biggest risk to our industry. I think training needs to be at the forefront. That we've got the ACIGS, which I'm a huge supporter of, and a huge we're a platinum sponsor. And I will continue to be a huge supporter of ACIGS. We do some great things with design, specification, academia, but I think without, I think sometimes we forget we can have all these great things at the top, but without the people to actually install, execute, we might find ourselves in a bit of trouble into 5 to 10 years. I really believe that. One thing is I was sort of lucky enough that the guys in America, the IARGI in the States, we've been talking for a couple of years, and myself and a couple of other guys are proctors to help our lining install buddies out. We became proctors to help facilitate, the CWT or CWT training for technicians in Australia. Certified welding technicians, yeah. It's pretty much, there's the TWI certification or the IARGI CWT certification. That's pretty much the only sort of qualification or certification there is, which I find pretty, coming from the construction background, I find it quite interesting. You have plumbers, electricians, you have all these trades, and they're all Australian recognised training.
Yeah.
But we have nothing apart from the CWT, which is a great thing, and we support it. But I really want to, if I can contribute anything to the industry, it's really championing that and getting our guys trained up with the right information, the right equipment, and hopefully link this great academia and great, the great, design firms that we have in this country, the great, minds. I think we're very fortunate. We've got some brilliant people working in our industry. If we can connect the guys on the ground to what we're talking about up here, I think it's paramount. I really do.
Absolutely.
So, again, we're opening up the IARGI opening up a Australian chapter, which again I'm very, very, very lucky to be heading up. There's a couple of guys, a couple of the team that we've created a board, which there'll be more information over the next month or two. There's another whole podcast probably just on that. Siamak. I didn't mean to segue that one in, but yeah, sure. It's on a roll. So look, I think the first and foremost is the CWT training and listening to that the lining contractors, because I listen to them most of the time, and they've got some genuine concerns, and if we can sort of work together as a collective, I think that's we'll survive it. But
absolutely, yeah. No, huge step in my opinion. I guess this is what our industry needs.
And just one more on that, Siamak. I think there needs to be a greater understanding from asset owners that not always the cheapest price is actually the cheapest price. And I think the old saying, you pay in the long term. Yeah. The amount of times that I've seen projects, and projects aren't always going to be perfect, but I've been engaged previously to look at do a tender review. Like the civil contractor and asset owner will go, all right, we want you, because of your experience in lining, you're an external consultant, we want you to review these 3 lining tenders. And I look at them and I'll go, all right, well this you just allow this for this for this, this for this, and then inclusions and exclusions, and they don't understand that if there's a digger on site that they need to provide, what the cost of that digger is, if there is a extension of time or if there is a delay, which we do live in this wonderful country where we have pretty temperamental weather, and coming into El Nino, I think. One of those. So hold on, I think we're in for a bit of a wild ride next year. So right. I think asset owners really do need to when they have a tender, really look at who the material that they're selecting, the civil contractor that they're engaging, how the civil contractor interacts with their lining contractor, because ultimately I have heard a lot of asset owners going, well, that's between them to sort out. Well, ultimately you're the asset owner, and if you've got a bit of critical infrastructure that you need online, that's actually your problem.
Yeah, they carry the risk.
So look, I think a client understanding the designer and the designer's requirements to sign off on a critical bit of infrastructure. The civil contractor needs to understand the geomembrane systems. The lining contractor needs to be able to buy the liner, and they need to be able to source the liner, deliver it, and install it correctly. And then obviously give the designer certifier the best opportunity to sign off on that bit of infrastructure. So they're probably the 2 main things I see an issue with the Australian market.
Sure. That's great. Well, Nick, coming towards the end of this podcast episode, the question I ask every guest I have on this podcast is about the highlight or achievements or good things in your career.
I've watched a few of these podcasts now, Siamak, so I sort of I tried to prepare myself and try to identify one single standout moment. But look, I'd probably have three, which are equally as memorable. One would be, when I worked for my previous lining installer company. Look, I went from being engaged to over the 7 years. At the end of that 7 years, I looked back and I was able to tender a job, bring it in from an EOI, tender a job, source the material, organise the delivery from factory to on site. Work with the installation team to achieve compliant QA submissions, and work with project managers, which it's always fun to do. Yeah. And look, I sort of found myself looking at, have I hit my ceiling in this organisation? And I had some really fond memories, working for that company, and I still have, had talked to the guys that I used to work with, and wish them all the best. But look, probably the second moment was when I took the leap. Yeah. And myself and another good friend of mine, or another friend in the industry, we started GOQ in 2018, and we hustled. We had to go out there. There was long, I think there was, you know what it's like. You start your own business. Your HR, your payroll, your BD, you were everything under the sun. And then you've still got to have a family and run that as well. So look, I think, and then just remember this, throwing in the COVID factor as well was a huge one. That was, we pretty much launched in 2020 was when we started winning first bigger projects, and to actually navigate through COVID, go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to, I think we've got 15 technicians for it working for us now. I think that was that was another highlight, building it from nothing to where we are now. But and look, the third one was actually last November. My wife and I and kids went on a 2-week holiday.
Nice.
And she said to me, she goes, you're very relaxed on this holiday. You usually got the phones, you're either looking at emails and something's always going on. Yeah. And I realized, I sort of pinched myself a moment, that we've built this business that's mature enough to not be reliant on one person.
That's right.
So, remove that sort of key man syndrome. We've got a great office staff. We've got great technicians. We've got great QA, great on-site guys. So, and look, that's it's not me. It's the team. The team has done such a great job, and I can't every single person that works for us. I congratulate, and I hope I can keep steering the ship in the right direction and keep going. But they're my sort of three top sort of highlights of my career there. So.
Yeah, that's great. And really congratulations with everything you've done, Nick, and the highlights of your company, achieving all those milestones, and then hopefully more in the future, and more success for yourself and the company.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for that. Thanks for your time, Nick, and thanks to the audience who watched us or listened to the audio of this podcast. We catch up with you in our next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Cheers.